It's a very old Jewish name, you know.
Tell me about your name. How old is it?
I'm named for my grandmother's sister, and they were German Jews, very wealthy Jews named Gans. Gans was a well-known family. And I got named after her sister, who had passed away.
How do you pronounce your name?
Ita. Ita.
And in Hebrew?
Ita, la même chose. It's, what do you call it? It's curious that there are people with that name that I know of in America, but they call them Rita, Juanita, Anita, all kinds of things. They never use the Ita's plain. I don't know why. Now, I do know that the Irish have a Saint Ita, and so they use the name Ita, I-T-A, because there's a Saint Ita that they know of.
Ita, what's your maiden name?
Ita. Oh, Herskovich was my maiden name.
Herskovich.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hershkovich.
Herskovich. Ita, please tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Montreal, March 27, 1932.
In what neighborhood?
I think they were on Park Avenue then. Could be.
Park?
Before we moved to Hutchison Street. And then we were on Hutchison.
Are you the oldest, youngest?
I'm the youngest of 3 daughters, and I have a younger brother, or had a younger brother.
So 4 children.
We were 4, yeah.
Tell me about your parents.
Well, my mother was Zabitsky, that was her maiden name, and came from a very wealthy, well-known family. They were very charitable, very generous, did lots of wonderful things.
Were they born in Montreal, your mother? Was your mother born in Montreal?
No, she came as an infant, but she came with her mother and her brother traveling first class. Not too many Jews did that kind of thing.
From where?
From Poland.
From Poland.
Although her mother had been from Germany, when she married her husband, they went to Poland. And he did a lot of work in Poland, my grandfather, made a lot of money. And he just got tired of doing the charitable work that was required of him and decided he was going to come to the United States. So when the boat landed in Halifax, it was a big storm, and the boat wasn't going further, so they told him, go to Montreal. They put him on a train to Montreal, and he ended up in Montreal. Everybody's got crazy stories to tell, as you know.
This is your mother's side of the family?
My mother's side of the family.
Your father's side of the family?
The Herskoviches came from, that's a good question. Romania, that's right, from Romania. But his mother's family came from Zhelchov, is that what it was called? I don't remember. Anyway, they spoke different languages, you know, and they made shidduchim for all these people way back when, in the 19th century.
Was your father born in Montreal?
Good question. He was one of 11 children, and he was the oldest of the 11 children. And I think there were 2 or 3 born in Europe, and the rest were born in Canada.
You mentioned that you had a grandmother who was from Turkey?
Yeah, his mother was from Turkey. My father's mother was Turkish Jewish. They spoke their own language, which
Latino.
And I wanted to learn that, and she said, you know enough languages, you don't need to learn anymore.
What kind of home are you brought up in? Like, is it, like, social economically, what kind of household are you from?
My mother was very much involved with charities of all kinds. She was the starter of the Mizrahi Women's Organization in Canada, and all kinds of things like that. So we did a lot of charitable work and whatever. We always had big meals with company, and stuff like that. We always had yeshiva bochers looking for a place to stay. And when my husband and I married, we always made room for yeshiva bochers. We had a big house here for a while in Yonkers, over the city line. And I would have 4, 5, 6 yeshiva bochers every Shabbos and Yontif that came from God knows where. But that's the way I was brought up, and that was a nice thing to do. It was not a problem.
And what do your parents do for a living? How do they support the family?
My father had a store. He sold electrical supplies. And mother occasionally helped him. But she was running a household and doing a lot of charity work. She was busy with Mizrahi women and all kinds of things.
And religiously wise?
Religiously wise, they belonged to, what was the name of the shul? I don't know, it was a small Orthodox shul in the community, that's for sure. And we were always...
Kosher home?
Pardon?
Kosher home?
Of course, of course. But we were always busy helping other people. That's what we were brought up, learning to help other people with things, with problems, with whatever. And my sisters and I all did that. We all did that. Never thought about it as
Did you
anything
go
special.
to a public school or?
I went to the first Hebrew day school in Montreal called the Montreal Hebrew Academy. And that was before the United Talmud Torah. That was the head of the United Talmud Torah. And as I said, we were 4 girls and 20 boys. And every once in a while, I'd like to hear what's going on with those guys because they were all very bright and very well educated. When we got through with the lower school, we went on to high school, Baron Bing High School in Montreal. We used to walk through Mount Royal to get to the school in the snow and whatever, carrying our shoes, wearing boots and whatever. And the teachers in the community fought to teach there because they wanted to teach us kids. And that was really very nice. It worked out very well. But I don't know what's happened to all of them because they all did very, very well. And I wrote to my cousin Morty Lecter in Montreal not long ago and said, see if you can find out what's happened to the old chevra, what they've accomplished, whatever.
Did you belong to a youth movement?
Yeah. It was like a Mizrahi youth thing. We used to go on Shabbat afternoons. We used to help out with all kinds of things. Certainly later with the State of Israel and whatever.
Where was so your parents pushed you guys to philanthropy? I mean, not philanthropy that you were millionaires, but like helping.
Helping whatever way you could help people and help whatever you could do with your talent, with your time, with your money if you had it. But talent and time was mostly what we had at those days.
Talent and time.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up as a Jew in Montreal in the 30s and 40s?
Well, it was certainly, we were a very small community. And that's probably my old man.
What can you tell me about the Jewish community in Montreal in the 1930s and 40s?
Well, I can tell you one of the things I learned from my grandfather was to do all kinds of good stuff, never put your name on anything. There was a small hospital called the Jewish General Hospital. Zeta gave a lot of money and helped with a lot of things. It expanded. It's become one of the most important hospitals in the world. But never put our names on anything. That was not the way to do it.
In Hebrew, we say matan beseter.
Whatever. We
Right.
just did what had to be done and walked away quietly.
Yes,
And-
Matan Beseser.
Matan beseter. It's okay.
And we were very, very, we never gave it a second thought. The trick was to do something good and walk away. No thanks, no nothing. And years later, we saw people that if they gave $10, they wanted a dinner in their honor, that kind of thing. What happened in recent years is that I said, we made a mistake. We should have had some kind of acknowledgement of what we did, not for us, but for the next generation to see that these things don't spontaneously combust. They happen because people do them. And who's going to tell them that people do them or who did them? Because it's there, no question about it. And somewhere in the late 40s, early 50s, when things got very rough in Quebec, my family, most of them, took their money, went to Toronto. They went to Canada, went to Israel.
You're talking about like the whole Quebecois,
Yeah.
FOQ,
Absolutely. They
all
just,
that.
Zeta's attitude was, my father came from Poland with his money because things were lousy there. I'm taking my money from Quebec and going to Ontario.
Is that what she did?
That's exactly what they did.
A lot of Jews did that. It got even worse in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah,
of course,
probably
but-
later. But when my uncle first did it, it was the early 50s. Yeah, the early 50s. So I haven't been back to Montreal in a long time because the family has mostly moved out. Mm-hmm. They moved to Israel, they moved to Florida, they moved to Quebec, to Ontario. And I guess there's a cemetery to visit, that's about all.
Was there any anti-Semitism in Quebec?
There was anti-Semitism, but because we kept to ourselves and did our own thing, we never got involved with any of it. In other words, we lived on our own street. We didn't have, quote, Jewish neighborhoods per se, except where they had businesses where they sold kosher food and kosher things. But I remember when we put up a sukkah in front of our door, my father invited the neighbors to come and see what a sukkah was, because they'd never seen such a thing before. The Jews and the non-Jews to come and take a look. It was interesting. So
Did they come?
Yeah, some of them came just to see what it was we were doing and how we were managing it, and thought it was very interesting, knew it was short term, it wasn't going to last forever, and taken apart.
Do you remember, now do your parents push you girls to be ideologically affiliated at some point? Are you like a Shomer Dati, Shomer Tzair, Bnei Akiva, Beitar? Is there like...
We joined these organizations because our friends did, and that's what Jewish young people did.
Right.
You know.
Sorry. Hold on, I'm just fixing something here. Okay. Yeah.
That's what Jewish young people did. And I would say when we lived on the street we lived on, there were certainly Catholic people living there. If they would see us walk to shul, we would see them walk to church. We would wave good morning, whatever. We were very polite to each other, but we had nothing in common. Our education was different, and our values were very different.
So you went to a private Jewish school?
Montreal Hebrew Day School. Montreal Hebrew Day School was the first one.
How old were you when you started there?
6, something like that.
Until the end, until you finished?
No. Then we went, when we got through with that in 7th grade, we went on to high school. Baron Bing High School was a local high school, but it was filled with Jewish students.
So it was a public school that was just filled with
a lot of Jewish students. And like I said, the teachers fought to teach there because they wanted to teach those students. And
do you remember, so you're born in 32?
Yeah.
Do you remember when the war breaks out in 39? Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. I was altogether 7 years old.
Yeah.
I was knitting a scarf for a soldier at 7 years of age. I wasn't the only one to do such a thing. So we were concerned because there were Jews coming out that they wouldn't let them into the United States. So we took them in Canada. Mr. Roosevelt was a horrible anti-Semite. And I know people now, to this day, who still live in Dominican Republic, Cuba, Haiti, Costa Rica. They were all Jews who he didn't let them into the United States. Some of them luckily got to Canada. And we've got to meet some of those.
Really?
But I have met
from Europe,
now.
They came from Europe?
Yeah, but I have met now. I know any number of people who they say they're Catholic because they live in those communities, but they don't go to church. They don't celebrate Sunday as a day of mourning or whatever. They work a half a day on Saturday. I mean, there's all kinds of fascinating history of these people. Nobody's ever written them up. I know a bunch of them, and I'm interested in the history, so I'm interested. But somebody should really do a number on them because it's fascinating.
But these
their
are not
history.
Jews that came in the 30s. These are Jews that came way before.
Not much before. It was the 30s.
So what was happening in Montreal with these Jews that were coming from Europe?
We were taking them in immediately into our homes. We didn't, because that was the only way to get them into Canada, was to agree to take them into our homes. And so everybody took somebody in.
Did you guys take somebody in?
In our house, I don't remember if we had room, but certainly our neighbor, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, everybody took somebody in.
Do you remember any of these people? Do you remember any
Nothing special, but we were, I grew up with some of them. Didn't even remember that they were part of that group initially. One of them was Elie Wiesel's sister, with whom I was very close. As a matter of fact, she was multilingual.
She got out. He didn't.
And when they started the first consulate of Israel in Montreal.
Well, that's 49. We're not.
Yeah. I'm just saying when they came there, they came to the Zionist organization looking for a Hebrew speaker. I was the only Hebrew speaker out of 30 employees. But Batya was a friend of mine. I don't remember how we ever met. I got her the job as a receptionist because she spoke 7 languages. So she was the receptionist at the Consulate of Israel in Montreal. And I was running the office altogether. How old was I? 16, 15, 16, 17.
In 1949?
Yeah, it was 1949. I was 17 years old. I was born in 32. It was just amazing. I mean, when I think about it now, it's kind of amazing. But it was we all had to keep busy. We all had to be creative. We all had to do things. There was no such thing as sitting around and watching television or sitting around and playing with games. We all had to do productive things that were creative, that were contributing to the community.
Do you remember when there starts to be talk in the house, your parents' house, of course, about what's going on in Europe during the war with the Jews? Is it?
We heard some of it. You know, they tried not to talk too much in front of the children, but we heard some things. And of course, as I said, the only way they would let them into Canada, and we all took company into our home, was refugees who survived, who came, because Mr. Roosevelt wouldn't let them into the U.S. And so in Canada, because we had agreed to take them into our homes, they came. So we had somebody, I remember, we had a young man. I wish I could remember his name. He's a very sweet guy. He eventually came to the United States and did all kinds of good things, etc. But everybody took somebody in. And what can I tell you? It's a different world, a totally different world. There are probably people with more memory of that stuff than I. I have not spent my time, you know, planning to talk to you about these things.
Well, when the war is over,
Yeah.
and it's clear what happened in the death camps and in the concentration camps,
Yeah.
there must be a very, I mean, you're in Montreal, but what's the general feeling of not only of feeling but of action, like what to do?
I didn't remember hearing anything much special at all. I mean, we just did what we felt we had to do. Individual people who needed something, took them in. Helped them out as best we could. Needed a ride across the border into the United States. It was a pleasure to do that for them. You know.
Then the borders were very loose.
Yeah, it was different.
Now, after the war, the situation in Palestine starts to become very volatile.
Well,
the reason I'm here today is because you did a lot of stuff in Montreal regarding this.
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff.
So this is what I want to really focus on now, and I really want you to try and walk me through.
I can't even remember much of it because I just knew that we had to do certain things. Package food and clothing and send it off to people. If somebody needed a place to stay, you turn your house upside down and make an extra bedroom so there would be a place for them to stay. I mean, everybody was doing it, didn't think it was anything special, because this is what you did to help people out. But I really never wrote it down or made any kind of memory of that stuff.
What, was there anything to do with weapons? Guns?
Not that I know of. There must have been people involved, but certainly young girls weren't involved with that at all.
Right.
Interesting. Take a look. No,
You have a
don't.
microphone. No, you have a microphone connected to you.
I don't want to disconnect it.
So that's right.
I want to
I'll
go
walk
to.
with you.
I want to go to my desk over here.
Okay. It's a nice desk.
It's got some old stuff in here. Let's see if there's anything of memory that we can think of.
Take it with you.
This is 1954, so that's later. 1953, Montreal, places visited. Ossipal Chasm. No, I thought I had earlier dates in some of this stuff. This is from 53. That's later, okay? And this is also later, okay? I'm sorry. I thought I had more stuff that was recorded that was earlier, but I guess not. No, this is just cards and stuff like that.
Here, have a look. Take your time. Have a look.
No, this is from 2000.
So, do you remember the outcry for help for Palestine when you were a teenager? That, like, in the community in Montreal? Do you remember that there was people coming and speaking? Do you remember?
I remember hearing about it, but I was not a part of it. They didn't include children. We just overheard when they were discussing it at the Shabbos table or whatever, and they come to the house. Occasionally you heard something about it, and many times they said, don't talk about it because we don't want the information to spread. We want to keep it quiet. And maybe they were concerned that a child would mention it to a neighbor or something else. So they were very careful with those kinds of things.
Were your parents active in doing something like this?
Oh, sure. My mother was very, very active. My father less so, but my mother very active. And did all kinds of very good things. And we learned to do the same thing, to do it, keep your mouth shut, walk away, leave it better than when you found it. And we still do things like that. And I bring up my children that way, too. My daughter does wonderful things in Jerusalem. Every once in a while I hear a story about something, I'm in a state of shock. But not really surprised, because we set examples. And 2 years ago, for whatever it was she was doing in Efrat, they made her a brunch party to honor all the things she had done. There were 120 people at this thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. So I sent a donation to help out with what they were doing.
And you were telling me about that you worked for the Israeli consulate in Montreal in 1949?
Yeah.
What did you do?
What did I do? All kinds of paperwork, publicity things that they wanted done. Helping Israelis who were there with their visas and passports and whatever else like that. And there was just 1,000 things to do.
How long did you work for the Israeli consulate for?
I guess I worked for them like 4 years. Well, they transferred me to New York because I was multilingual. So I was there from 49 to 52, or 52, or 53. Then I moved to New York, and I was doing the same thing here.
Where was the consulate in New York?
It was not really a consulate. They had me in a private room in a private place on the east side, where I would go in and take care of all this multilingual stuff. And there was, I don't even remember the guy I worked for who came in and left and whatever. And then my husband and I got engaged, and I left them. They were very upset because they couldn't replace me.
But why'd you leave?
Because we were getting married. He was in the Army, and we went to Columbus, Georgia.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
When I got to Columbus, Georgia, I could not believe the anti-Semitism and the anti-black attitude in the community. I thought was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I remember approaching, what's his name? He's still famous, that miserable, wretched man. He was the son of a wealthy minister, not a rabbi, a Christian minister. And I called him on the phone, told him who I was, that I had come from Montreal and New York, and I wanted to help black people become able to vote and become part of the community and whatever. And he just ignored me completely. He was the wealthy son of a wealthy minister. He drove around in a chauffeured car. Oh, what's his name? You know him. He's still around.
No idea.
He's still around.
Pat Robertson?
No. Come on. He's still around. He's horrible. I'm drawing a blank. I can't believe it. I probably have it in one of those books of mine there. What's his name? He's still around. Spoiled brat, wealthy son of a wealthy minister, black, and wanted to help them out, and he didn't want any help.
He was black?
Yeah.
Martin Luther King?
Martin Luther King, that's the guy. Hello, good morning. Martin Luther King.
Okay.
That miserable SOB. He was a spoiled brat, wealthy son, would not help any other black person. And I came there with all this kind of help that I had done for so many different kinds of people, willing to help him to let's do something with the black community. Was not interested.
Why?
You'd have to ask him.
Well, he's dead.
Well, that's too bad, but...
He died in 1968.
He turned me off completely because of his attitude about everything.
But I think Martin Luther King was in Alabama.
Well, when we went
He was in
to
Georgia. He was in Georgia.
Georgia's, what do you call it? Columbus, Georgia is where they were with Fort Benning. I'm trying to think. Well, I'm trying to think. No, he lived to be older than that. He was
So
around.
we're not talking about Martin Luther King.
No, we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
The father died when you said, but he stayed on.
The son of
The
Martin
son,
Luther King.
yeah, that's the
Okay.
one.
I don't know him, but his father was taken out.
Yeah. But Martin Luther King Jr. was the guy,
The third.
whatever. And I wanted to do stuff with them, and he absolutely did not want to do anything except be a spoilt brat son of a wealthy man, period. I found that inexcusable and certainly unacceptable. But it's interesting because my family was so mixed. My grandfather, as I said, came from Poland, a wealthy man, brought a lot of money with him, Davin Svard. So he had an interesting background of his own. His wife came from a very, very wealthy family, the Gans family from Germany, and also did wonderful charitable things. That's what these people always did. And they brought us up that way. The other side of the family, the grandmother, as I said, was Turkish, but very, very talented. Her daughter invented the blind hem stitcher machine that revolutionized the whole garment industry, because that's what she learned from grandma. We all learned to use our hands. We've been doing that. I'm still doing that.
What were you doing with when Israel was becoming a state in 1940?
1948.
16 years old.
In 1948,
You're 16.
I'm 16 years old, yeah.
You said that you were helping to do stuff.
I did a lot of illegal stuff.
What kind of illegal stuff?
Acquiring things that we weren't supposed to ship to Israel.
Like, for example, what?
Oh, God, I don't remember, I swear. Everything from food, clothing, medical supplies, a lot of medical supplies. And
would you go pick something up at an address and then bring it to another address? Like
that kind of thing, sure, yeah. Or somebody would, we'd call a place and they said they can't give us anything, but they're throwing things out in the garbage. We went to their garbage. We got what we needed. I mean, there's a zillion stories in the Make It City. I can't even remember them all.
I'd like you to try and remember them for me.
Oh, God, I can't remember them all. But we did a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's amazing. And it's interesting, when my daughter went to Jerusalem to go to law school, and everybody said, how do you let her go to Israel to go to law school? I said, what's wrong with a Jewish girl going to law school in Israel, for God's sake? What's your problem? It was such a wonderful advantage to do such a thing. It's just great. And she's very good at what she does. And she was married to a man who was the child of Holocaust survivors, but who didn't permit music in the house, laughter, jokes, or anything else that was pleasant. So she had a husband like that for quite a long while, raised 4 children. He passed away 8 years ago. And this past Friday morning, she got married again. It was the first time. I'm delighted. We were watching it all on television. I'm delighted. They'll be coming to visit. I can't wait to see them. But I guess we set the examples. But then the examples had been set for me by my grandparents and my parents. So that's why we did what we did. And we set examples for our children and grandchildren. And they're doing wonderful things. So, you know, it's really, really great. I see them do wonderful things. They never look to get their names in lights or be acknowledged in any way. And we were all like that. It's very nice. I wish there were more people like that, that's all.
Were there any big names in the community in Montreal that were like big wheelers and dealers with getting Palestine together and getting arms and medicines? Like
there must have been some among
Sure.
the Bronfmans and the others, but they were quiet as we were quiet, so we really don't know for sure who did what. But obviously stuff was being done because the benefits, in Israel we saw the benefits from these things. And but as I said, we all were brought up to Shashtil. Rumor had it years later that my grandfather, the one who came from Poland with the money, put the Bronfman boys into business. They were a bunch of brothers with no money, and Zeta put them into business, which is possible, and never talk about it. But years later, many decades later, one of them mentioned it. So we knew that why there was a connection to the family, because the family would get invited to their simchas and other things.
Because the Brahmin family is the family of Montreal.
It
the
is.
Jewish family of Montreal.
Absolutely, that's right.
Before bootlegging.
That's right. But Zeta,
It's old money.
Yeah, but Zeta put them up in business. He said everybody likes to drink Slivovitz and Lekvar and all the rest of it. He said, I'm going to give you the money to go into the alcohol business. And that's what they did. Zeta always made alcohol in his place, just for the family and for
Did
friends.
he?
Yeah. So we were used to that. We didn't think it was anything special. But the one thing we were always brought up with was keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody. Don't say anything. Do what has to be done. If you have any questions, please ask.
Do you remember I'm going to give you a few moments in history that I'd like you to try and reflect on to see if you remember where you were, if you remember. The first one is November 1947, when the United Nations partitions Palestine. Do you remember listening to that on the radio? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. We did listen to it on the radio, but I don't remember. I don't remember.
And what about hearing about the Declaration of Independence by Ben Gurion like a half a year later in May 48?
Yeah, I remember that, listening to that. Somewhere we had a copy of it too, someplace, but I don't remember where it is. But to me, it was wonderful that these things were happening, that we had helped to set the ability to do these things, but that it was taken out of our hands and taken over by people who were doing a good job. That's fine. But that's how I was brought up with my grandparents. When Zeta took me everywhere that he did, Zeta Ephraim Yosef was his name, so he was named for Franz Josef, my Zeta. Okay, Franz Josef had been good to the Jews. And so yeah, that's how my grandfather was named Ephraim Yosef for Franz Josef. So did all kinds of good things. It's interesting, my grandfather went to shul always with a top hat, a cutaway coat, and striped trousers. And I thought that that's how Jewish men go to shul. So I walked with him all the time, not thinking it was anything special, only finding out years later that it's kind of special and kind of unique. Interesting. Did you know men who walked to shul like that? Top hat, cutaway coat, and striped trousers?
Yeah. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. I remember walking with him in that outfit. He was carrying his etrog and lulav in one hand and holding my hand with the other one. That's a memory I have of walking to shul with him. Not funny?
So you can't remember anything else that you were doing in 47, 48 in Montreal?
I remember we were collecting clothing to send to Israel. We were doing all kinds of stuff. But everything was all shah still. The idea was do it and don't talk about it and forget about it, you know? And so we pretty much forgotten about it. But obviously we did something because things did happen and things did change. And that's what it was supposed to be, without anybody taking credit for it.
Sure.
And that's how it should be. I still do stuff like that. I believe in it. It works very nicely. So did I bore you to tears?
It's okay. We're going to stop right now.
Okay.